Have you ever caught a faint, stubborn scent clinging to your clothes or skin, no matter how often you shower or how fresh your laundry is? If you're a woman over 60, you might have noticed this silent, embarrassing companion that just won't seem to go away. For years, I thought I was the only one, convinced I just wasn't scrubbing hard enough or that maybe my sense of smell was playing tricks on me. I'd buy the fanciest soaps, use extra fabric softener, and even switch perfumes, but that odd odor always seemed to linger just out of reach. I felt frustrated and a little ashamed, especially in close company, hugging my grandkids, sitting next to friends at church, or leaning in for a family photo. But here's what I wish someone had told me sooner: you're not alone, and it's not your fault. This is a common challenge for many women in their golden years, and most of us don't realize the simple, everyday habits that quietly work against us. Today, I want to share the truth about this struggle, and offer hope, practical advice, and the comfort of knowing you're in good company. If you are not subscribed, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. Subsection 1. Ignoring light leaks. I remember the first time I noticed it. Just a tiny damp patch that showed up unexpectedly, catching me off guard as I stood up from the kitchen table. It was just a few drops, really, barely enough to notice unless you were looking for it. At first, I brushed it off, blaming it on the extra cup of tea I'd had with breakfast or maybe a laugh that went on a little too long while catching up with my neighbor over the fence. It's probably nothing, I told myself. Just one of those odd things that happen once in a blue moon. I never mentioned it to anyone. After all, what woman wants to talk about bladder leaks? Especially not at this age, when pride and privacy start to feel more precious than ever. But those small leaks kept coming. Sometimes when I sneezed, sometimes when I picked up a heavy grocery bag, and sometimes for no reason at all. I began to notice a faint, persistent odor that seemed to linger, following me through the house. I'd step out of the shower feeling clean and refreshed, put on a fresh pair of pajamas or my favorite cotton dress, and still by afternoon, I would catch a subtle scent, something musty, almost sour, clinging to me. It made me self-conscious, especially when family came to visit. I remember one afternoon, my daughter-in-law, always so polite and gentle, quietly suggested I change my sweater before dinner, whispering that it had picked up the smell from the old couch. I felt a hot wave of embarrassment, but I nodded, grateful she was kind enough to say something, and I hurried to the bedroom, heart pounding in my chest. It was in moments like these, alone and a bit shaken, that the truth began to sink in. This wasn't just about the occasional accident, or a fluke caused by too much water at lunch. There was something deeper happening, a quiet change that no one had warned me about, but that so many women experience as the years go by. Light bladder leakage, I would later learn, is as common as gray hair or aching knees among women my age, but almost no one talks about it. It's the silent companion of aging, sneaking up quietly, then setting up shop in our daily lives. At first, I tried to ignore it. I'd change my clothes a little more often, spray a bit of perfume, and double up on laundry detergent. But nothing fixed the problem, and if anything, my efforts only masked the deeper discomfort I felt inside. I stopped wearing some of my favorite outfits, worried they'd betray me with a telltale spot or smell. I became more reserved, hesitating to lean in for hugs or sit too close to friends at church gatherings. The joy of being surrounded by loved ones was slowly being replaced by a constant undercurrent of anxiety and self-doubt. It wasn't until a routine checkup that I found the courage to bring it up with my doctor. I sat there in the chilly exam room, hands folded in my lap, and finally asked, "Is it normal to leak a little? And what can I do about the odor?" She smiled kindly, almost as if she'd been waiting for me to ask, and told me, "You'd be surprised how many women your age experience this. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and there are ways to manage it." She explained that light bladder leakage happens for all sorts of reasons: childbirth, menopause, weakened pelvic muscles, even years of simply living life. But the good news, she said, is that you can take back your confidence with just a few small changes. I listened carefully as she recommended moisture-wicking underwear designed for women with light leaks, as well as thin incontinence liners. She reassured me that these products weren't bulky or embarrassing. They looked and felt just like regular underwear or panty liners, but had special materials that kept moisture away from the skin and controlled odor before it could even start. I was skeptical, remembering the awkward pads my mother used years ago, but my doctor showed me samples, letting me feel how thin and soft they were. The first time I tried them, I felt a small wave of relief. There was no more dampness, no more persistent smell, and best of all, no more constant anxiety about who might notice something I couldn't hide. I started to feel like myself again, confident enough to wear my favorite clothes, to take my grandkids for ice cream, or to linger after church without worrying about lingering scents. What surprised me most was how normal and comfortable it all felt. The products blended into my daily life so seamlessly that I often forgot I was even wearing them. Of course, there was still the matter of pride. I'll admit, for a while, I hesitated to buy these products at the store, worried that someone might see them in my cart. But as the weeks went by, I realized there's no shame in caring for your body and doing what you need to feel good in your skin. That quiet self-respect is something to celebrate. If I could go back, I'd tell my younger self, and every woman I know, not to ignore those small leaks or to let embarrassment keep you from finding solutions. There's nothing braver than facing the truth and choosing to take care of yourself. I began to share my experience with a few close friends, and the response was always the same: relief, laughter, and sometimes tears. "Me too," they'd say, their voices dropping to a whisper. I thought I was the only one. We started trading tips, recommending brands of underwear, or sharing stories about little moments of humor that came from embracing this new chapter of life. Instead of feeling isolated, I felt connected, part of a quiet sisterhood of women who had learned to navigate the small indignities of aging with grace and good humor. Looking back now, I see that ignoring light leaks only gave them more power over me. But by facing the truth and making a few thoughtful changes, I reclaimed my comfort and my confidence. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in these words, please know you're not alone. There are gentle solutions that work, and it's never too late to step back into the world, dignified, self-assured, and ready for whatever comes next. Subsection 2. Using the wrong soaps. For most of my life, I took great pride in keeping myself clean. I grew up believing that a woman's reputation began at home, in her bathroom, with the way she cared for her body. My mother always had a collection of soaps lined up by the sink, fragrant, colorful, promising freshness and a sense of well-being. As a young woman, I carried that tradition forward. I would stroll down the aisles of the supermarket, letting my fingers glide across bottles of body wash with names like Spring Morning, Lavender Bliss, and Ocean Breeze. Each scent seemed to tell a story of youth and vitality, and I would always pick the ones that smelled the strongest, hoping that their fragrance would stay with me all day. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. As the years passed and my hair turned silver, my love for scented soaps never faded. I thought, if anything, I needed them more than ever. After all, isn't it natural for older women to worry about keeping fresh, especially as bodies change and skin doesn't feel quite the same? I wanted to be the grandma whose hugs smelled like wildflowers, not one who children whispered about after a long day. So I'd lather up with a generous amount of my favorite floral wash, scrubbing my skin until it squeaked, especially after gardening or walking around the block. But slowly, something began to shift. After every shower, I still noticed a faint musty smell clinging to my skin, especially in those sensitive areas no one wants to talk about. At first, I blamed the humidity in the house, or perhaps a lingering towel that hadn't fully dried. I started washing everything: towels, bath mats, even my bathrobe, more often. Still, That persistent scent returned by mid-afternoon, even when I'd only been sitting and reading on the porch. I began to worry. Was I missing something in my routine? Was this just another sign of getting older, something I would have to accept in silence? The turning point came after lunch with my best friend, Margaret, at our favorite cafe. As we stood up to leave, I caught a whiff of that same old scent and felt a flush of embarrassment. Margaret, ever the gentle soul, noticed my worry and took my hand as we walked to the car. "You know," she said quietly, "I've been having the same trouble. Nothing seems to help, no matter how much I scrub." That was the first time I realized I wasn't alone, and it gave me the courage to ask my doctor about it at my next checkup. In that small, sunlit exam room, I confided my fears. My doctor listened patiently, then asked what kinds of soaps I used. I rattled off the familiar brands, proud of how much effort I put into staying clean. She nodded thoughtfully, then explained something I'd never considered. "As we get older," she said, "our skin changes. It becomes thinner, drier, and much more sensitive, especially in intimate areas. Those strong, perfumed soaps can do more harm than good. They strip away the natural oils your skin needs, upsetting the pH balance and making you more vulnerable to irritation and, yes, odor." She recommended switching to a mild, fragrance-free soap, or even just using warm water for sensitive spots. I'll admit, at first, I resisted. It went against everything I believed about staying fresh. No soap, just water. It sounded like giving up on self-care. But I trusted her advice and decided to try. I tucked away my beloved floral body washes, replacing them with a plain, hypoallergenic bar and a bottle of gentle cleanser. For a week, I used them every day, following her instructions. No scrubbing, just gentle washing and a soft towel to dry. The results surprised me. Within days, my skin felt calmer, less tight and irritated. That afternoon musty scent, the one that made me anxious in close company, began to fade. I no longer needed to reapply perfume or body spray every few hours, nor did I feel the urge to shower twice a day. My skin felt smoother, not stripped, and for the first time in years, I felt truly clean, not just covered in fragrance. Looking back, I realized that my well-meaning efforts to scrub away odor were actually making things worse. The harsh soaps I loved so much were drying out my skin, leaving it vulnerable to bacteria and inflammation. My body, doing its best to protect me, was fighting a losing battle. I remembered a line my mother once said, though I didn't understand it then, "Sometimes less is more, darling." Now, it made perfect sense. I began sharing what I learned with my friends at our weekly church group. At first, they were skeptical. After all, we grew up in an era when a woman's soap was almost as personal as her perfume. But as we talked, more and more women admitted to the same problems. Dryness, irritation, and odors that didn't seem to go away, no matter how much they washed. Some tried my doctor's advice too, and soon our little group was trading tips on the gentlest soaps and best ways to care for our skin. There's a comfort in knowing that aging is not about giving up on yourself, but about learning to care for your body in new ways. For me, the journey started with a single change in the soap I used, and ended with a whole new sense of comfort and self-respect. Now, as I prepare for bed each night, I no longer worry about how I smell or whether my skin will feel tight and sore in the morning. Instead, I'm grateful for the lesson that gentleness brings lasting freshness, and that real confidence comes from accepting and adapting to the changes of time. If you're struggling with the same worries, let me offer you this. Sometimes, the answer is not to scrub harder or add more scent, but to let go of old habits and listen to what your body needs now. A little kindness in the shower goes a long way, leaving room for the kind of peace, comfort, and quiet dignity every woman deserves. Subsection 3. Forgetting to change liners and pads regularly. When I was younger, I never gave much thought to things like liners or pads. They seemed like something for other people, maybe women just after childbirth, or those with special medical needs. But as I got older, those little absorbent helpers quietly found their way into my life. At first, it was just an extra bit of security during a sneeze or a laugh, a tiny shield for those just-in-case moments that come with age and a well-lived life. I would tuck a thin liner into my underwear in the morning, more out of habit than necessity, and then get on with my day, never thinking about it again until bedtime. But something started to change as the years passed. Even on the days I felt perfectly dry, by evening I would notice a faint, sour scent that clung to me, as if my body was whispering a secret I'd tried to ignore. I washed up, I changed my clothes, but that persistent odor was always waiting for me by dinner time. At first, I thought maybe my detergent wasn't working, or perhaps I was just getting a little too sensitive in my old age. I even blamed my diet, switching out my coffee for herbal tea and eating less garlic, hoping for a miracle. Nothing seemed to help. Then, one afternoon, while out shopping with my granddaughter, I caught her wrinkling her nose as she reached for my hand in the crowded checkout line. "Grandma, did you spill your juice?" she asked innocently, looking up at me with those honest, sparkling eyes. My cheeks burned as I quickly brushed off her question, but inside, my heart ached. I realized that I'd been ignoring something important, not for lack of care, but out of sheer habit and a little stubbornness. For years, I'd convinced myself that if my liner didn't feel soaked, it was still good to go. Why waste a perfectly good pad when it seemed clean? But what I didn't understand was that those little liners, even when they feel dry, quietly gather tiny amounts of moisture throughout the day. Every cough, every trip up the stairs, even just sitting in a warm room, each moment leaves behind traces you can't always see or feel. That hidden dampness becomes a perfect home for bacteria to multiply, and it's those invisible guests who bring the stubborn odor that simply won't wash away. I still remember the day I finally worked up the nerve to ask my doctor about it. She listened kindly, nodding as if she'd heard this story 100 times before. "You'd be surprised," she said gently, "how many women go through the same thing. The trick isn't just using liners or pads, but knowing how often to change them, even when they don't feel wet." She explained that, as we age, our skin gets more sensitive and our bodies more vulnerable to irritation and infection. Bacteria love warm, moist places, and a liner worn all day is like a welcome mat for them. Her advice was practical, but it felt like a revelation. Change your liner every few hours, even if it doesn't seem full. You'll notice a real difference, not just in odor, but in how fresh and comfortable you feel. I'll admit, I balked at first. Liners aren't exactly cheap, and I hated the idea of going through so many each week. But the thought of another awkward moment with my granddaughter, or worse, the silent judgment of others, pushed me to give it a try. I started setting gentle reminders on my phone, or simply carrying a few extra liners in a small pouch in my purse. At first, it felt like an inconvenience. I'd duck into the restroom at the grocery store or slip away during a long church service to freshen up. But very quickly, the change was obvious. That sour scent was gone, and I felt lighter, more confident, like I'd quietly reclaimed a part of myself I hadn't realized was missing. As I became more comfortable with my new routine, I also discovered a whole world of products I'd never noticed before. There were reusable, washable liners made from soft cotton that felt gentle on my skin and didn't irritate me the way some of the older brands did. They were kinder on my wallet, too, and made me feel good about doing a little less harm to the planet. Changing them out became as natural as brushing my teeth or washing my face, just one more way of caring for the woman I'd become. I started talking with friends about it, sharing my awkward stories and little tips. To my surprise, almost everyone nodded along, eager to swap advice or laugh about their close calls. We all wanted the same thing, to feel clean and confident, no matter what the day brought. Sometimes, the lessons of age aren't about grand revelations, but about the small, quiet changes we make in our routines. Forgetting to change liners and pads isn't a failing, just an old habit that needs a gentle nudge. With every fresh liner, I remind myself that I'm worthy of comfort and dignity, that self-care is a form of love, and that it's never too late to embrace new ways of caring for ourselves. So if you, like me, have been clinging to habits out of convenience or thrift, I encourage you to listen to your body, let go of old routines, and welcome in the freshness that comes from just a little extra attention and kindness. Your confidence, and those you love, will thank you for it. Subsection 4. Wearing synthetic underwear. There was a time when I thought I had finally cracked the code to comfortable underwear. It seemed like every department store and catalog was filled with soft, stretchy, brightly colored panties made from fabrics with names like microfiber, nylon blend, or Cool Max. The advertisements promised comfort, style, and that elusive barely there feeling. No lines, no bunching, easy to wash and quick to dry. After years of wearing what my mother would have called sensible undergarments, I found myself drawn to these new, modern options. The fabric felt so smooth between my fingers, and the fit seemed flattering under my dresses and slacks. It almost felt like a small rebellion against the plain, practical cotton panties I'd grown up with. For a while, I was convinced I'd made the right choice. Getting dressed in the morning felt a little more fun, a little more fashionable, and, I'll admit, I liked having something bright and cheerful tucked away under my clothes. But gradually, something started to feel off. Even after a fresh shower, I'd notice a sticky, clammy sensation halfway through the day, especially during summer or on the rare occasion I'd go for a longer walk with friends. Sometimes I'd catch a faint odor, nothing overpowering, but enough to make me check myself twice before hugging my grandkids or leaning in for a photo at family gatherings. I didn't make the connection at first. I blamed my detergent, my diet, even the weather. I started showering more, switching soaps, and changing my routine, thinking maybe it was just another quirk of aging. Yet, no matter how much I tried, the discomfort and subtle odor always seemed to return, stubborn as ever. It wasn't until I went in for my annual checkup that the real culprit came to light. My doctor, a gentle and understanding woman who always made me feel heard, asked about my daily habits. When I mentioned the clamminess and odor, she asked a simple question: "What kind of underwear do you usually wear?" I explained about my new collection of stretchy, synthetic panties, expecting her to approve of my modern taste. Instead, she smiled kindly and shook her head. Synthetic fabrics, like nylon, polyester, or microfiber, might feel soft, but they don't let your skin breathe, she explained. They trap heat and moisture, which can create a perfect breeding ground for bacteria. That's why you're feeling damp and noticing more odor. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. It all made sense, suddenly. Those fancy fabrics that had promised comfort were making things worse. My skin wasn't getting any air, and any little bit of moisture, from sweat or those all too common light leaks, was getting trapped, feeding bacteria and in turn, producing that stubborn scent. Cotton, my doctor said, is still your best friend. It's breathable, gentle, and absorbs moisture, keeping your skin dry and healthy. I'll admit, I groaned inwardly at the thought. Cotton underwear reminded me of plain white briefs with thick seams, certainly not the kind of thing you see in glossy ads or pretty packaging. But I was tired of feeling uncomfortable and self-conscious, so I decided to give it a try. I went home, sorted through my drawer, and set aside all the synthetic pairs, some of them barely worn, but now clearly not worth the trouble. I ordered a pack of 100% cotton panties in soft, neutral colors, choosing styles that looked simple but promised the comfort I suddenly realized I'd been missing. The change was almost immediate. By the end of the first week, the sticky feeling was gone. I no longer caught that musty odor as I moved around the house or visited friends. My skin felt calmer, less irritated, and even my laundry seemed to come out fresher. I realized I was reaching for my new cotton underwear every morning, and the colorful synthetics stayed untouched at the back of the drawer. Comfort, it turned out, was less about the latest fabric innovation and more about what truly worked for my body. I started to talk to my friends about it, quietly at first, unsure if anyone else would admit to the same experience. But as soon as I mentioned the trouble with synthetic underwear, there were nods of recognition, shared laughs, and even a few sighs of relief. "I thought it was just me," one friend said, echoing the words I'd been afraid to speak out loud. We swapped stories and recommendations, laughing about how we'd all been fooled by marketing, and how sometimes the simplest solution was the best one all along. What surprised me most was that cotton underwear didn't have to be boring or old-fashioned. There are so many options now. Soft pastels, gentle lace trims, flattering cuts, that I found myself enjoying the process of choosing new favorites. There was a quiet pride in knowing that I was taking care of my body, honoring the wisdom that comes with age, and refusing to compromise comfort for fleeting trends. Now, when I get dressed in the morning, I don't worry about feeling sticky or wondering if someone else might notice a scent I can't quite shake. I move through my day with a little more confidence, a little more ease, and the knowledge that sometimes the tried and true advice is the best. If you're still holding on to those synthetic panties because they're cute or affordable, do yourself a favor. Try switching to cotton. Your skin, your confidence, and even your laundry will thank you. Sometimes, embracing the classics is the most empowering thing you can do. Subsection 5. Not drinking enough water. There's a certain logic that creeps into your daily routine as you get older, one built on years of making do, solving problems, and adapting to changes you never saw coming. For me, it started so innocently, just an extra thought here and there, a small tweak to avoid embarrassment. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that the less water I drank, the fewer trips I'd need to make to the bathroom. With my bladder not what it used to be, and the anxiety that came from the occasional leak or urgent dash down the hallway, it seemed like a clever solution. Why set myself up for those awkward, hurried moments when I could simply cut back on my water and have more control? At first, I didn't think much of it. I'd pour myself a small glass of water at breakfast, maybe have a cup of tea with lunch, and then spend the rest of the day sipping just enough to keep my mouth from feeling dry. I found myself glancing at the clock during outings, calculating how long I could go without needing to find a restroom. On longer car rides, I'd avoid drinking altogether. "I'm just being practical," I'd say to my daughter, waving off her gentle reminders to bring a water bottle. After all, fewer bathroom breaks meant fewer chances for embarrassment, or so I thought. But slowly, the consequences crept in. I started to notice that my urine was turning a deep yellow, sometimes almost amber. When I'd use the restroom, there was a sharp, pungent odor that lingered long after I'd flushed. I would wash up and change clothes, but still felt a hint of that smell following me around the house, clinging to my favorite pants and even the cushion on my favorite chair. It was as if my body was quietly telling me something I didn't want to hear. The real wake-up call came during a lunch with my friend Helen. We were chatting about life, sharing stories of grandkids and gardens, when she suddenly leaned in and whispered, "Do you ever worry about not feeling fresh, even after a shower?" I hesitated, but nodded, feeling a flush of relief that I wasn't alone. She confided that her doctor had suggested drinking more water to help with the odor she'd noticed. "When we don't drink enough, everything gets more concentrated, including the smells," she said with a rueful smile. That conversation stuck with me. I began to wonder if, in my attempt to avoid one problem, I had accidentally created another. I started doing a bit of research and even asked my doctor during my next checkup. She explained that when you don't drink enough water, your urine becomes much more concentrated, darker in color, and has a much stronger odor. "Think of it as your body's way of getting rid of waste," she said. "If there's not enough water to flush it out, everything just sits there and gets stronger." She also reminded me that concentrated urine can irritate the skin, making it more likely to develop rashes or even infections, especially if you're wearing liners or dealing with light leaks. Feeling a bit sheepish, I decided to change my ways. I started carrying a water bottle with me, filling it in the morning and making a point to finish it by lunchtime. Instead of worrying about bathroom breaks, I began to plan for them, taking a quick trip before heading out or making sure I knew where the restrooms were at my favorite stores and parks. I kept a small notebook in my purse, jotting down little reminders to take a sip every hour, and even set an alarm on my phone to nudge me if I forgot. The difference was almost immediate. Within a few days, my urine became lighter and the sharp smell faded away. My skin felt better, less itchy and dry, and I even felt a little more energetic. I realized that I'd been depriving my body of something it desperately needed, all because I'd been too embarrassed to risk a few extra trips to the bathroom. What surprised me most was how easy it became once I stopped fighting it. Yes, I had to use the restroom more often, but it was manageable. I discovered the freedom of wearing a discreet liner or absorbent underwear, just in case, and built a new sense of confidence into my daily routine. Instead of shrinking my world out of fear, I expanded it, making room for laughter, walks in the park, and even the occasional cup of coffee with friends without worrying what might happen. As I shared my new habits with other women in my book club, I found I wasn't the only one who'd fallen into the trap of drinking too little water. There were stories of headaches, dry mouths, and feeling tired all the time. Small miseries that melted away when we started listening to our bodies instead of our anxieties. We encouraged each other, making hydration a friendly challenge, even turning it into a bit of a game. Who finished their water bottle today? Became a favorite question. Looking back, I realized that the wisdom of age isn't just about knowing what to do, but being willing to unlearn old habits and try new ones, even when they feel inconvenient or awkward at first. Drinking enough water is one of the simplest, kindest things you can do for yourself, and it's never too late to start. Now, I raise my glass of water, not just tea or coffee, to the idea that caring for yourself isn't selfish or embarrassing. It's a gift, one that lets you move through life with confidence, comfort, and a little extra sparkle in your eye. And isn't that what we all deserve? Subsection 6. Sitting too long without washing up. Retirement had always sounded like a dream. Finally, the time to slow down, to wake up without an alarm, to linger over morning coffee and savor a newspaper instead of rushing off to work. When it first arrived, I embraced the slower pace wholeheartedly. Some days I'd stay in my cozy pajamas until nearly noon, curled up in my favorite armchair with a book or working on a crossword puzzle, the television playing softly in the background. The house was quiet, the sun slanting through the curtains, and I would think, I've earned this peace. It took a while for me to realize how much more sedentary my life had become. With fewer places to be and no pressing schedule, hours would pass with me barely moving from my seat. At first, I thought nothing of it. Wasn't this the reward after a lifetime of work? But over time, I started to notice subtle changes. My hips felt stiffer, my legs ached a little more after getting up, and most surprisingly of all, I began to catch a faint, unpleasant odor that seemed to follow me even after I'd showered. It was never strong or obvious, just a slight mustiness clinging to my clothes and skin, but it was enough to make me self-conscious. I tried to ignore it at first. Maybe it was the chair, or the blanket I always wrapped around my shoulders. But the feeling stuck with me. I found myself dreading close contact, a hug from a grandchild, or sitting next to a friend at church. I would quietly slip away to the bathroom to check, sometimes reapplying perfume or changing into a fresh top just to feel a little better. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. It wasn't until my granddaughter, with her innocent honesty, wrinkled her nose and said, "Grandma, you smell like something wet," that the truth truly sank in. She didn't mean any harm, but her words stung all the same. That night, I sat awake and wondered how I'd let things get this way. Had I grown so comfortable with my quiet days that I'd forgotten the importance of basic routines? As I thought back, I realized just how much time I was spending sitting, nestled into that warm corner of the couch, wearing soft, loose clothing, and rarely feeling the need to freshen up throughout the day. The more I read, the more I understood. Our bodies produce sweat and natural oils all day, even when we're still. And for women like me, who might have the occasional light bladder leak, a little moisture could go unnoticed for hours, especially when you're sitting for long stretches in warm, snug clothes. That warmth and humidity, especially in private areas, was creating a little microclimate that bacteria love. The result was that faint, persistent odor I couldn't shake, no matter how clean I felt after my morning shower. I realized my daily habits, while cozy and comforting, were quietly working against me. Determined to reclaim my confidence, I decided to make a change, not just for myself, but for my own sense of dignity and well-being. I started by setting an alarm to remind myself to get up and move every hour. Even a quick stroll to the kitchen to refill my water glass, or a short walk down the driveway to check the mail, was enough to get my blood flowing and give my body a reset. These little bursts of movement did wonders, not only for my muscles, but for my mood as well. I also began a simple midday hygiene routine. Around lunchtime, I would step into the bathroom, gently wash up with warm water and a soft washcloth, and change into fresh, comfortable clothes, even if I didn't plan to leave the house. I started keeping a spare set of clean underwear and pants in my bedroom, just in case I wanted to change again later. It was a small effort, but it made a world of difference. Over time, these new habits became second nature. The stiffness in my hips faded, my energy picked up, and, perhaps most importantly, the musty odor vanished. I found myself reaching for perfume less often, and I felt at ease welcoming hugs and sitting close to loved ones. The change wasn't dramatic or difficult. It was simply a matter of paying attention and caring for myself, even on quiet, uneventful days. I began to talk to friends about it, and found I wasn't alone. Many of us had fallen into the same comfortable routines, wearing the same pajamas all morning, skipping midday, freshening up, sitting for hours without thinking twice. We shared stories and solutions, laughing at how easy it was to forget such simple self-care in the comfort of retirement. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that caring for yourself isn't just about grand gestures or special occasions. Sometimes, it's as simple as getting up, moving your body, and giving yourself a moment to refresh. These small acts of kindness are gifts you give to yourself, a way to honor the years you've lived and the comfort you deserve. Even in the slow, peaceful days of retirement, dignity and confidence are worth a few extra steps. So now, whether I'm enjoying a slow morning with my book or gathering with family for Sunday dinner, I know that a little extra care keeps me feeling like my best self. I've learned that there's no shame in comfort, as long as it comes with a sprinkle of attention, and that self-respect, at any age, begins with the simple routines we choose to keep. Subsection 7. Neglecting the laundry routine. For the longest time, I didn't think much about laundry. At least, not beyond the big things like sheets, towels, or the piles of clothes that grandchildren managed to leave behind after a weekend visit. My routines were simple: a quick cycle, a splash of detergent, and the confidence that, after all these years, I knew how to keep a household running. When it came to my underwear, pajamas, and the comfortable lounge pants I slipped into every evening, I often treated them as an afterthought. If there were no visible stains or if they smelled just fine, back they'd go onto the chair or into the drawer for another wear. But as the days stretched out in quiet retirement, I began to notice something I hadn't before. Even when my clothes looked clean by late morning, there would be a subtle, musty scent trailing after me. I'd catch it as I bent to tie my shoes or climbed into bed, a faint whisper of something not quite fresh. I started to wonder if maybe the problem wasn't with me, but with my laundry. The truth became clear one day as I folded my favorite nightgown and caught a whiff that made me pause. It wasn't strong or unpleasant, but it was enough to make me feel self-conscious, especially when hugging my grandkids or sitting close with friends. I remembered how, when I was younger, my mother insisted on washing undergarments separately and always in hot water. Back then, I'd rolled my eyes, thinking she was being old-fashioned. But now, those lessons made sense in a way they never had before. I did a little reading and found that tight-fitting clothes, underwear, and pajamas, especially when made of synthetic fabrics, can hold on to more than just yesterday's comfort. They trap bacteria from sweat, natural oils, and even minor bladder leaks, things that cold water or a quick wash just won't remove. I realized that, over time, these hidden guests were making my clothes, and me, feel less than clean. So I decided to make a change. I began washing my undergarments, lounge pants, and nightgowns separately, using hot water and adding a splash of white vinegar to the wash. I took extra care to dry them completely before folding them away. I even promised myself never to wear anything twice, no matter how clean it seemed. The difference was remarkable. That stubborn, musty smell disappeared, and I felt fresher, more confident, and more comfortable in my skin. Now, when I open my drawer, I know every item is truly clean. There's a quiet dignity in that. Proof that a little extra attention in the laundry room can make a world of difference in how you feel every single day. Looking back on this journey, I realize how many small habits I'd carried for years without question. Habits that slowly chipped away at my confidence without me even noticing. I once believed that aging meant learning to live with a few indignities in silence, that little things like light leaks, faint odors, or days spent in cozy pajamas were just part of the deal. But what I've learned is that dignity isn't about denying these changes. It's about meeting them head-on, making gentle adjustments, and allowing yourself to feel fresh and self-assured at any age. It's surprising how much power there is in the simplest acts of self-care. Drinking enough water, changing liners regularly, choosing breathable cotton, and even giving your laundry routine a thoughtful update. Each step, though small on its own, is a way of quietly saying, I matter. Now, when I greet my grandchildren at the door or gather with friends for coffee, I do so with the easy confidence that comes from knowing I've taken good care of myself, body, mind, and spirit. If you see yourself in my story, I hope you'll feel encouraged to try one new thing from today's video. Maybe it's switching to a gentle soap, or standing up to stretch after an hour in your favorite chair. I'd love to hear which tips spoke to you most, or what you plan to change in your own routine. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be just the encouragement someone else needs. And if you found these lessons helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're building a community where everyone can feel seen, supported, and inspired, one gentle story at a time.